Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a yoga teacher, a mom of 3, and also the founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And I feel like over the years, I've learned a lot as a business owner, as a yoga teacher, even as a parent. I've learned a lot the hard way. And that's really where this podcast was born. I wanted a place where yoga teachers could come each and every week, connect to information, inspiration, ideas, and a supportive community of other entrepreneurs and other yoga teachers. Speaking of support for yoga teachers, if you're not already in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group, come on over and join us. There's over 10,000 yoga teachers from around the world. So when you have questions, you can jump in there and ask those questions. Every once in a while, we do a share thread. And we also really gauge the group to see what podcast topics do you need to help you? What articles can we write to serve you? So if you have an idea, make sure to tag me as well in that group, and I'll be sure to check it out. In that group, there were some posts that happened sort of over the course of a month that really inspired today's episode. Today, we're going to dig into a topic all about inclusion in yoga spaces. We've had different podcasts talking about this in the past here on the podcast, and I'll try and link to all of them. Crunch has compiled this amazing list. And it's pretty exciting for me to look at this list and think, oh, wow, we've had all of these guests talking about inclusion in different ways, in a way that really brings yoga to marginalized communities and people who maybe didn't have access to yoga before. And this week, we're exploring how to become more inclusive towards people in abundant bodies. And whether we like it or not, or want to even look at it or admit it, yoga has become this really exclusionary practice that's limited to the privileged few. If that rubs you a little bit the wrong way, I get it. And just take a little quick scroll through any yoga stock photos, or if you search for yoga on a social media app, and you can see that the marketing for yoga is really catered towards wealthy, thin, young, flexible, white, able-bodied people. However, you as a yoga teacher, we all together here at the Connected Yoga Teacher, we know that the benefits of yoga goes beyond, the shape of your body, the size of your body, your age, your ethnicity, or your ability to move. And I know because you're here and you're listening that you are going above and beyond to try and be more inclusive towards people who don't fit these quote unquote yoga stereotypes. And yet, even though we're working really hard to make spaces more accessible, more inclusive, we can easily make mistakes and use offensive terms when we're referring to people in abundant bodies. That might be in our yoga classes, but it can also be in spaces like Facebook groups. This language can be harmful and hurtful for those who are in abundant bodies, and as yoga teachers, we can all learn to do better. This is why I am so excited that Dianne Bondy is here to talk with us about this today, to share more about how we can change our language surrounding people in larger bodies. Dianne has some amazing insights about the harm we can cause with our words, how we can be more mindful of the words we use and choose, and how to ensure that we hold space for the bigger people in our classes in a way that is very respectful, welcoming, and non-judgmental. And Dianne even touches on what to do when yoga students might come into the space. We've worked really hard to create a space that's non-judgmental, respectful, and welcoming of all body sizes. And then what do we do when a student comes in who isn't aware of how much harm this can cause? I also get into asking Dianne about her new book, Yoga Where You Are, Customize Your Practice for Your Body and Your Life, as well as her previous book, Yoga for Everyone, 50 Poses for Every Type of Body. I'll make sure that we link to both of those in the show notes, as well as some other things in the show notes. We try and make it so that you can listen while you're on the go, and then the notes are back there ready for you. So those notes can be found at theconnectedyogateacher.com/219. Before we dive in and meet Dianne, let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hello, Connected Yoga teachers. This is Shayna with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. We've talked a lot about how Schedulicity can save you tons of time as a teacher, but what about your clients? The inspiration to take a yoga class can hit anytime, anywhere. Actually, being able to put your name on the list for a class takes that whim and turns it into a commitment. So if your next student realizes they need to get limber and blissed out halfway through a bad blind date, while they're in the middle of a stressful meeting, or at 2 o'clock in the morning, all they need is 15 seconds in Schedulicity. Get booking done in a hot flash.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity. Alrighty, let's meet Dianne. Dianne Bondy is the founder of Dianne Bondy Yoga and a firm believer that self-love is a revolutionary act. She is a social justice activist, author, accessible yoga teacher, and the leader of the Yoga for All movement. For more than 20 years, Dianne Bondy has been empowering students to come to the mat as they are, educating teachers on the need for inclusivity in yoga and how to bring that into their classes, and at the same time leading systemic change within the yoga industrial complex. Dianne is also a public speaker on topics such as yoga and diversity, eating disorder recovery and caregiving, body image, self-empowerment, holistic self-care, entrepreneurship, and social justice and activism. Along with Amber Carms, who we chatted with in episode 210 of the podcast, Dianne offers the Yoga for All training to train yoga teachers in adaptive and accessible yoga. As I said before, Dianne is also an author. You can find her 2 books that have been published, and she's also published in Yoga International, The Guardian, Cosmopolitan, and more. This interview with Dianne is really eye-opening. I'm so excited that you're here for it. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Dianne. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Last time we got to connect and chat was in person at the Accessible Yoga Conference. That feels like ages ago now.
It does. Was it 2018? It might be ages ago.
I think it was. I do think it was. It was in Toronto.
At the University of Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because I went to school with a Shannon Crow. So whenever I see your name, I'm like, no, not the same person.
That's really cool.
Isn't it though? I thought so.
I used to live with another Shannon Crow.
You did?
Yes.
Wow. That's a common name, huh?
That's 3 of us now.
3 of you. Interesting.
So you've been busy. I see you have 2 books out now.
Yeah, I do. Yoga Where You Are is the latest one that came out December 12th. And I wrote that with a friend of mine, Kat Hagberg, who's the editor-in-chief of Yoga International. So her and I have been writing this particular book, Yoga Where You Are, probably for as long as we've known each other. We would start and stop it all the time. We'd be like, we met each other at Yoga International and we hit it off instantly. We were both recovering Anusara yoga teachers. So we were all like inner spiral, outer spiral, all the stuff that Anusara yoga used to talk about. And that most at times we didn't believe. And we had some very similar critiques of the system. I think it has its benefits and it's certainly very, the asana part of it is very in depth, but we were having some problems with other stuff in it. And so we were talking about our experience of being Anusara teachers. And then we started practicing with each other. And we noticed how similar we taught because we kind of had that background and how we were really connected to bringing accessible, adaptable, inclusive yoga to as many people as possible. So we're like, we should write a book about this. And so we opened a Google Doc and was like dumping ideas, like just verbal diarrhea. You're just dumping ideas onto this page and it was never going anywhere. And then finally, we got an opportunity to like sort it out, put it together, and write a book for Shambhala. So Yoga Where You Are came to be. And I had written back in 2018. Has it been 2018? Maybe 2019. I can't remember now. It's all blending together. I had the year before had Yoga for Everyone come out. And that was a book that I'd done with DK Publishing. So part of the series.
That's nice. That book I bought for my mom. She was wondering how to make yoga more accessible. She's a yoga teacher and
nice.
She loves it. I was like, I met Dianne Bondy. She's like, ooh, like you're the famous author.
I think it's funny when people say that. I know, I don't see it, but I appreciate people buying my book and loving it. I'm so grateful. It was a labor of love, that first one. When you write a book all by yourself, that's a lot of work. When you write it in conjunction with somebody else, it's a lot less work. It's still a lot of work. So that first one was like, I didn't know I was going to get it done. Writing a book is hard.
Right. Well, amazing. That's amazing. Tell our listeners who maybe don't know what you do, who do you work for? What is the work that you do?
I work for myself. I fancy myself an entrepreneur. I've been teaching adaptable, accessible, inclusive yoga my whole life. I don't know how to teach any other way. So I teach asana, and I teach inclusion, and I teach diversity work, and I teach about what it's like to show up in spaces as a big-bodied Black person and how we can create more accessible spaces where we see more diversity on the mat. So I guess you can say I do a little bit of anti-racism work and equity work. And I've been doing this work in yoga spaces for about 11 or 12 years now. I know it's really trendy now to do it. Things are shifting, which is great. But I've been doing this for a long time when people weren't interested in it at all. So.
Right. You were like, we've been here. We've been doing this work
the whole time.
I'm so glad that you are doing this work. And especially around, I'm excited that we get to dive in and talk today because you've been tagged multiple times in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group as soon as there's a post that comes up and says like, and I'm just going to call it out here. Like I've even been thrown off like thinking, do we let this post in? Do we not let this post in? There's been language in some posts that basically one of the words thrown around is like, I have a student coming who is obese, or I have a student coming around who is overweight. And so I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah. I think for me, there's a lot of charge to those words and a lot of judgment to those words, right? So when we say things like, I have an overweight student, I think people need to check how they're projecting that, because all you need to say is, I have a student in a larger body. I have a student in a plus size body. We don't get to determine who is overweight and who isn't. We don't get to determine who is healthy and who isn't. We don't get to determine who is obese and who isn't. And all those are charged words that don't mean exactly what we think they mean, or they come with some kind of stigma that is not necessary in a space we call yoga, or a space where we practice yoga. So I don't care for that language. And if you're coming to the practice with this question from a place of judgment, then I ask myself, is that person safe in your class? So I am very much about embracing the language and calling people what they want to be called and identifying with people the way they want to be identified. So the way we use language in either identifying our students or teaching to our students has huge impact on how safe they feel, how connected they can be to the practice, and how they show up in the space. So coming to this space with this like, oh, I have an obese student, what should I be doing? Because that's what it sounds like when I hear it. You might not mean it that way, and it might not be your intention to make anybody feel othered, but your intention doesn't matter as much as your impact in these spaces. So if you have a plus size student, all you need to say is, I have a plus size student and I want to be as welcoming and as accommodating as possible. What are some of the things that I can do to make the space feel better? But you really need to be clear with your language. We don't need to be calling anybody obese, and we don't need to be calling anybody overweight, because we don't get to make those judgments about people's bodies. Actually, we don't get to make any judgments about people's bodies. So that might be something we can take to our Swadhyaya, aka self-study, around our languaging when we're trying to create equitable spaces. And I would argue if that's the language you're using, you don't know what an equitable space is.
I'm so glad that you're here to talk about this. Thank you. This is why you got tagged in it, because people know that you are, at the end of the day, trying to make really safe spaces for every body that comes in.
Everybody.
And really caring for each person, like really looking at where that comes from. I'm guessing we grew up hearing the language, or we hear it on the news used by the news people or
Right.
medical people, and then we think it's acceptable when it isn't. Do you have any thoughts on like how we're talked to by medical professionals? Because it's the same.
It is the same. I'm very lucky because I have a medical professional who isn't weight biased. So if you're not really sure, there's a lot of bias in the medical profession. There's a lot of bias around skin color. There's a lot of misinformation. I recently, I've always known this, but it was recently validated that, how people of color show up in the medical system is very different from non-people of color showing up in the medical system in terms of how they're treated around pain and around their own wellness. I'm very lucky not to have a doctor who considers any of that stuff, but it's not appropriate language, in my arrogant opinion. To refer to somebody as obese and assume things about people's bodies based on that characterization. There's lots of misinformation around that word. There's lots of pseudoscience around that word. I've had lots of people share with me how they've been traumatized within the medical profession, either because of their skin color or because of their size. And a lot of people go out, not seek medical treatment because they know that there's going to be a certain bias around the size of their bodies. And I always encourage people, you can fire your doctor. Keep looking for a doctor who's weight neutral. You could reach out to any of the eating disorder organizations like NEDA or NEDIC if you're in Canada, and ask if they can refer you to healthcare professionals that aren't weight biased. If you're not sure about whether or not you're weight biased in your teaching, I recommend that you pick up the book Health at Every Size and start to read it and see what you believe, what you think about bodies that are plus size, because it's one of the last groups of people in the world that we get to openly discriminate against. And language is one of the number one ways we discriminate. So if we're going to use the excuse that this is a language we hear on the news, we've been using horrible language to other ethnicities. We've been calling Indigenous or First Nations people Indians, which is a white term that colonizers used to identify this group of people that when they thought they were in India, but they were actually in North America.
This is so ridiculous. Like, this is like the white people made a mistake, but then just kept going with it.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to call you all because we thought we were in India.
Yeah. And we don't want to change and we don't care to change. And what's the big deal? And it's not hurting anybody. And I don't care that you don't want to be identified that way because I have all the rights and I get to identify you. That's what this kind of language sounds like. Language is the number one way we get to discriminate against each other. For me as a Black person, I've been called everything from Negro to colored to, okay, I'm Canadian, African-American, I'm like, okay, I know I look like I'm African-American. I am of African descent, but I'm not American. And, it's just all like, why can't we just let people identify the way they want to be identified and call them that? And if you're not sure, ask. If you're not sure, ask. Instead of traumatizing somebody. Everybody's running around taking trauma-informed yoga, but aren't showing up in the world and thinking about, perhaps I shouldn't say that, or maybe I could think before I open my mouth, or maybe I should ask people how they want to be identified. The first thing you asked me on this podcast is, what were my pronouns? How do you pronounce my name? And that made me feel like, okay, she cares. This is a safe space. But when we're talking about people in larger bodies, you can just say that. People in larger bodies. My favorite word, and it's really picked up some traction, is people in abundant bodies. Another word I've been using is robust, because these are all, I think, really great words. I am robust. I'm abundant in my language. I'm abundant in my personality. Therefore, my body's abundant to kind of hold this package together.
Right. I love those words. Robust, abundant, plus size, people in larger bodies.
People in larger bodies as opposed to overweight and obese.
So this brings up a question of mine. We had Amber Carnes on the podcast, and
She's my girl.
know. I'm sure your name came up in that one, actually. And I was so inspired because she does like a description of her social media posts and a description of her photos.
Yes, I started doing that today.
Well, I did it.
God, I'm late to the party. I said, damn it.
So I decided I'm going to do it for Amber's episode. And I found a picture because I was like, I'm just going to use the words that she used.
Yeah.
But Amber describes herself as a fat person. And I took it out of mine. I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think not everybody is there yet. Not everybody's okay with being called fat because we know this is a charged word. If she's using it to describe herself, that's fine because that's how she identifies. She's made her peace with that word. But there's a whole group of people where there's a lot of pain connected to that word. So I think if you're self-identifying as fat, that's great. But I think unless you know that of a person, maybe ask them.
Right. So this goes right back to like finding out how this person
identifies. We never want to misgender anybody. We never want to mistake anybody's nationality or ethnicity because that's hurtful too. So the best way to go about these things is to ask, but there's a lot of people who feel some kind of way about the word fat. I mean, I made peace with the word fat maybe a decade ago. It's taken me a while because, I got picked on as a kid and my dad used to torture me with the fat word. And now I just see it as a description. I'm currently rocking several shades of pink and purple and blue hair. And I look at it the same way, right? Like I have pink, purple, and blue hair currently. And I'm fat. And fat is like my skin is brown or my eyes are brown or I'm wearing I think it's mauve or mauve or gray. I don't know what color it is.
Goes well with your hair.
Thank you. It's a look. I'm really careful. Fat's a hard one because there's a lot of people who haven't made peace with that word. And we still use that word in a charged kind of way in society as a way to try to humiliate somebody. We still use it that way. So I can see how people haven't made peace with it, but there's a lot of us who have.
Yes. And this brings up another thing that I think that we could still have that charged judgment underneath it if we haven't done some of the deep work.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Language, I'll say it again, language has the power to elevate. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to connect. But on the flip side of it, it has the power to shame and humiliate and other people. So we need to decide how we're going to use the power of language. We can use it to uplift and inspire, or we can use it to humiliate and demean. And it's about intention and it's about impact. So what is your intention that you're sharing, right? What is the purpose of the language and what is the reaction that you want? And you need to really think about that in your teaching if you're looking to create more equitable spaces.
How else can we think about making someone feel welcome and safe in our yoga space when they come in an abundant body?
You know what I find, and this is something that's come up for me time and time again, as teachers, we may be fully aware of our language, introducing ourselves, letting them know we're here if you have any questions, letting them know that we've had training to work with all kinds of bodies so that no question is going to be stupid. And, we've got all kinds of opportunities to share. We're really, I don't say it particularly to one person. I usually say it at the beginning of class. Hi, I'm Dianne. I've been teaching yoga for 35 years. I'm a yoga teacher who believes in equity in yoga spaces. So I will be presenting what I call my idea of a yoga for all class. I'm going to give you a bunch of different opportunities or options when I teach, and you pick the option that's best for you. And if I haven't given you an option that works, you can put up your hand. You can even call me out by name in class. You can say, hey, Dianne, I'm struggling here, and I'm happy to come over and help you. And know that the struggle is part of the practice. It's not called yoga perfect. It's called yoga yoga practice, right? So we are trying to figure it out as we go. So if you have a question about it, there's somebody else in class as well who's struggling with the very same thing. And if not, it's a learning opportunity, for anybody else in the class, and often there are other teachers in the class. It's a learning opportunity on how you interact with your students in a way that feels brave and inspiring and connected, as opposed to a way that makes them feel like they're being othered because they can't do, you name the pose, whatever pose it is that we're looking at. So I think that's important. That's how I approach a class. The second problem, though, that comes up, and I've seen this time and time again, and it's come up in a lot of workshops, is it's not always the teacher that creates the space where it doesn't feel safe or good. It's often the reaction of the students in the room to the person in the larger body showing up. Moving their mats or congratulating a bigger bodied student for coming to class and letting them know, that if they continue at it, they'll probably lose weight or get more flexible or whatever bullshit we're spewing these days about yoga, right? So that's another problematic thing. Like, people really need to mind their own bodies. I can't tell you how many times people have reached out to me and said, I was in a class and people move their mats, or people wouldn't talk to me, or people are asking me if I was dieting, or people have congratulated me about coming to class and letting me know that they're supporting my weight loss journey or whatever it is. And I just don't know how we haven't learned how to mind our own business, because one of the most spiritual things you can do is mind your own business around things like that, right? Where you don't want to mind your own business is when you see an injustice happening. That's when you can stick your face in there and make a stink and be a good ally. And if you see one person trying to be helpful and encouraging people by saying, good for you, you did such a good job, that bullshit cheerleading thing we do, unless we've asked for it, don't. I don't. You don't know what people are going through. It's supposed to be a space that we're all getting healing. So if you could just mind your own business on your mat, that would be really helpful to the rest of us. If you feel compelled to talk about me, maybe when you get to your car, you can call your friend and have a kiki where I can't hear you. But honest to God, I just think it's so problematic. It's not always the teacher that creates that kind of space. But if you are a teacher and you see this behavior happening in your class, speak on it.
So what would you say in that moment if that was happening in your class?
When I see people move their mats or get some kind of way, I'll say to them, listen, okay, so if you're here practicing yoga with me, then you know it's beyond the asana. It's the way that we treat others in the room. So if you've moved your mat, and sometimes I'll just call people out in the moment, or if you've stopped talking, or you feel some kind of way about somebody else in the class, that's your work to do. The problem isn't that other person in the class. The problem is you. And if you need to roll up your mat and leave here because you're embarrassed, now would be the time for you to go. I am not tolerating this kind of behavior anymore. I think in the past, when I was a new teacher, or I wasn't sure of myself, or I was in my 40s, I don't know, whatever the thing was, that didn't stop me from doing these things. Now that I'm in my 50s, I think my filter's partially been turned off. I complain about that with my mother, who's 79. I'm like, where's your filter, Mom?
She's like, I don't need it anymore.
Right, because she's 79. I'm like, oh my God, I'm never letting that happen to me. And here I am. In certain circumstances, I'm like, we were here to create a space where everybody feels welcome. And if you're not capable of doing that with your body language or the way you behave, then this isn't the space for you. But on the flip side of that, people know that I teach this way. So I'm usually not attracting those kinds of students who are going to be rude to other people. But we need to call it out in class. We're all in this together. We're all here to learn. And part of our yoga teachings is ahimsa, nonviolence and non-harming. So if you're moving your mat or thinking ill of somebody in a different kind of body, or who identifies differently than you, who's come to the space for healing, this is not a space for you to be in. And say that. Even if you have an opportunity to theme, here we go, this is my Honor Star roots coming up, theme your class around this kind of idea. What does it mean to show up in a space non-judgmentally? And if you want to be more subtle, if you don't want to be overt like me, you want to be a subtle Canadian, because we tend to be subtle here. We put the B in subtle here in Canada. So if you want to be subtle, you can just sit at class and go, sometimes when we come into these spaces, we forget that we're practicing together, and that the energy we share in this space, even though we're not speaking, illuminates greatly. So we want to create a space that feels welcoming for all of us. So let's sit with our breath for a few minutes and think of maybe some of the ways we can make these spaces more welcoming for new students or for students who might be new to the practice, maybe, and sit with that. And as we move through the practice, let's continue to ruminate on what it means to create a space where we all feel comfortable, because some of us can go anywhere and feel comfortable in a space, and others of us don't have the same opportunities.
That's beautiful.
So
I hope all of our listeners
anything.
just like scribble that down frantically, because that was good.
Yeah.
Both
And
of them.
Keep bringing it up. Remember, keep bringing it up. So in Anasara, we were like, you can't have a spiritual sandwich. You can't say something really cool in the front, say something really cool at the end, and say nothing in the middle. I think you can do that, and I do that. But I think if you can weave that theme of self-awareness, self-acceptance, acceptance of others, these are teachable moments, because sometimes people don't even know they're behaving like jackasses. Like, it's so ingrained in their behavior, they're unaware. Well, the practice of yoga is about awareness. So here's an opportunity for you to become aware that you're acting like an asshole.
Right. Oh, this is good. I wonder also, when you get together with like that aunt who's a bit awkward at Christmas,
yes,
and
we all
she makes some comment about like, oh, is that so-and-so? And is she a bit bigger? Like it's. Do you have anything that you have in your back pocket for that moment?
I do. I had a situation with my in-laws saying something about my body. And I mean, I have a long, sordid, difficult relationship with my in-laws, much like Meghan Markle. Long, sordid, and difficult. So once again, I'm just kind of like, I know I wouldn't appreciate it if somebody commented on my body. So I'm not going to comment on anybody else's body. That's usually the things that I say to that old aunt. Instead of like taking her out, which is what I want to do, cut her off at the knees and think, who are you to be saying anything about anyone? Like, we really, again. But when people start mentioning bodies, I'm like, I don't think I would feel comfortable if she were talking about my body. What do you think about that? So I always flip it back on them, right? Like, I always make it a query. Wow. It's funny how we like to demonize people for gaining weight. Don't you find that so strange? Wow. I wonder if she's going through some stuff right now, and she's, and she's comforting herself the best way she knows how. I think that's why she possibly looks bigger to you. I think she looks fabulous and healthy. Like, I go down a group of things. It really depends on the tone and my mood at the time. Are you catching me in a nice moment, or are you working my last good nerve? Because if you are, you're going to hear about yourself. Once again, the filter of 50, right? I'm just like, I'm sorry, what did you say? Can you explain what you meant by that? Because that makes people blah, 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 blah. And then it centers them back in their own bullshit.
Right.
So that's another thing, right? What did you say? What I think I heard you say was this. Is that what you meant? And then all of a sudden, they haven't said anything else for the rest of the evening. And I'm good with that.
That's fantastic.
I don't need to hear from you again.
One other topic that you are really passionate about is like taking out the food and diet language out of yoga. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And it's always, especially now that the weather is starting to break a little bit and we've all been sheltered in place for so long, people are wanting to get back out in the world. And I hate all the language I see come up even around any kind of fitness or movement spaces about earning your food or burning off calories or getting that beach body thing. I'm so over that. You know what I mean? Put on a bathing suit, go to the beach. Nobody cares. Like, we got to get to the point where all kinds of bodies are normalized. But I especially think it's problematic in yoga spaces because, once again, these are healing spaces. And we don't know what brings people to yoga. We do know a lot of time people who are practicing are working through some stress and trauma that they have. And we don't need to perpetuate that by making them mad about something, about how your body looks, right? Amber and I, when we started our teacher training together, the Yoga for All training, we started teaching that together. She said something in the very beginning of our training about the mat being a ceasefire zone. So everywhere else in the world, I'm concerned about what I look like, my weight, whatever. Can we create a ceasefire zone where we're not, demonizing the body for not looking a certain way, where we're not trying to fit into a bathing suit or a pair of pants, where we're not constantly hyper focused on what the body looks like, and give people an opportunity to sink into the practice and really notice what they're feeling in their hearts, really show up for themselves in a way that, helps illuminate self-care instead of making people feel bad yet again somewhere else because they don't live up to some ridiculous ideal that nobody knows. Well, we all know where it came from. That's not true. But that stupid ideal that it is completely unrealistic, that everybody's body is different and everybody's body is showing up the best way it knows how. And everybody's body is doing the best that it can. Can we not just celebrate that? And that's the kinds of things I say in class. I was out for a run the other day. I haven't been running much because I've been nursing my knee, but I found that when the pandemic started, I took up running because I was really anxious. And as much yoga as I did, it wasn't helping enough. Like I just needed another way to be physical. And so I took up running. I've been running on and off for 30 years. And so I took up running, and I just was out running just this week last week or a couple of weeks ago for Ahmaud Arbery. So he had on the 2nd or the 23rd of February, we run for people who can't run. He was killed for being Black and running. So I run for him, and I ran for him on that particular day. And I ran into a friend of mine I went to university with who's recovering from cancer. And I haven't seen her in a long time. And when I saw her, she looked great. She looked robust. She looked great, because when I'm used to seeing people recovering from cancer, they look like they're recovering from a very difficult situation, right? And she looked robust. And I said that to her. I go, oh my God, I am so happy to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. We've all been blocked because she's going through treatment. She can't see anybody. And she was on the trail and I was on the trail. And we were 6 feet apart, just to be clear, 2 meters. We were social distancing. I was running on the grass. She was on the trail. And she said, hi, Dianne. And I went, oh, hey, oh my God, you look so fantastic. You're such a sight for sore eyes. And she was like, oh, thank you. Thank you. You're being kind. You're being kind. She said that because she automatically defaulted to that I was talking about the size of her body because she's gained weight during treatment, which I think is fantastic, quite frankly. And I wasn't meaning that. I was just meaning that her energy was wonderful. And I stopped running. When she started apologizing for her body, I stopped running. Quite frankly, any excuse to stop running would have been great, but I stopped running for that. And I said to her, stop it. I want you to stop it. I want you to stop it. I want you to appreciate that your body has just been fighting a very serious disease. And this is the way it's showing up for you. In a robust, strong way. It's building itself up to fight back. And can we be appreciative of that? Who cares what we look like? What matters is what we feel like. What matters is what we can celebrate. What matters is what we can have empathy for in our bodies. All this other stuff is garbage. This is a learned condition that we need to unlearn. What you look like has very little impact. Has very little impact on the world long term, because this shit is temporary, right? It's temporary. It changes.
It's so true. Oh my gosh. I love that you said this to your friend.
I did. I stopped running. I was looking for an excuse to stop running, but this was a great one. I stopped running and I went, no. We're not doing this today. No. And she was like, thank you. You gave me perspective. Thank you. I don't want to keep you from your run. I'm like, please keep me from my run. I'm out here struggling. I haven't run in 6 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard. Why do I do this? And then at the end of my run, I'm like, oh, I feel great. I love running. I'm just like, what is it with me and running?
This is powerful. The language that we use with our friends in our marketing, because I hear you saying that, in our classes, to really take a look at that again and see. Now, if we thought, okay, this is a good place to start, but I want to learn more, how can people work with you? How can they connect with you and work with you?
Yes, you can come see me on my website, DianneBondyYoga.com. And I have tons of courses on this. I've written tons of articles on this. If you follow me on Instagram, every now and again, I get in my feelings And I go on Instagram Live and tell the truth. I say, like, this is what happened today. This is how I dealt with it today. What are your feelings on this? Let's have a conversation. And so those are the places you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram.
That's amazing. We'll put your links in the show notes. I'm also wondering, and I'm going to look at this, we have our group rules and we've hit our maximum, which is 10. And I feel like we have a group rule that's like, don't talk about food.
Yeah.
But
weight loss.
Yeah, I think we need to focus on like watch your language around bodies. If we can somehow incorporate that into our group rules as well.
You know, be conscious of your language around bodies. It can't be fat phobic and body shaming. And here's some examples of body shaming, and here's some examples of fat phobia. We want to allow people to show up in this space for healing. And using this kind of language doesn't allow for that to happen. It's very triggering, and it's unnecessary because there's other ways to describe things.
So true. We have a lot of words that we can
We
use.
do. Yeah, you know what I mean? Use your words. You're a big boy. You're a big girl. You're a big person. You're a fully realized person.
Yeah.
Use your big words. Use your big people words. That's what I would say to my 5-year-old nephew. Are you crying? Can you use your words and tell me why you're sad?
It's true. It's true.
Just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. That's my saying from high school. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
Thank you so much for all of this, Dianne. This has been amazing. And I'm just grateful for all of the work that you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you for having this podcast, for having this group, for finding these topics important, and for continuing to push the conversation out there, because we need people like you doing this kind of work to help us keep moving and evolving forward.
Oh my goodness, Connected Yoga teachers. Thank you so much for hanging out here. Isn't Dianne amazing? Thank you again, Dianne, for answering this question. You know, what was happening is if there was a post about people in larger bodies and it wasn't worded that way, it was worded in a way that was offensive, we were finding that Dianne was being tagged the most out of everyone in our group. And so this is why this podcast episode was really important for us to put out there, to do. It goes along very nicely with last week's episode with Jillian on body positive yoga. And the other thing that we've added in as moderators of the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group is we're just really looking at posts that might be coming into the group where maybe the poster doesn't know that the language is offensive. So bringing attention and awareness to this, and now we'll be able to share this podcast episode with our Connected Yoga Teacher community anytime that happens. And in doing so, we're creating this space in there that is really supporting the learning that goes along with this, as well as creating this braver, safer space for yoga teachers of all sizes and all walks of life to come and hang out and feel supported when they scroll through all of the comments and questions in the group. So I would encourage you, Connected Yoga teachers, to share what were your key takeaways from today's episode. If you want to put them in the show notes, you can do that over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/219, or you can share about it in the Facebook group. What is one thing that maybe you used to say that you've changed since listening to today's episode? This is ongoing work. This is just like any of the other social justice issues that we face as a society. We have been conditioned and we have been raised in certain ways. And as we question that, it can be uncomfortable work. So I just want to say thank you again for being here, for really digging in and seeing how you can create braver and safer yoga spaces for everyone. Thank you also to our entire team for making today's podcast episode possible. And thank you again, dear listener, for being here. It means the world. I know that you have a lot of things calling you. And so when you choose to hang out here, it means a lot. On a personal note, I am on day 73 of my 90-day goal to get outside every single day. And I am feeling really excited about this, Connected Yoga teachers. I was a little bit skeptical starting a 90-day goal Oftentimes before I've started goals and just thought, I just want to do this every single day for the rest of my life. But this time I decided to set this goal of, I want to do this every day. And I had decided on 90 days, which felt next to impossible. I want to tell you that. I love getting outside, but as many of you know, sometimes it is very windy, cold, snowy here in Canada. We just had some snow not that long ago in April. It's not uncommon to have snow in April in Canada. So I'm pretty excited. And I want to know, as I leave you with this last question, is there something that you can do for your self-care that you could invest in and say, yeah, I'm going to try to do that for 90 days in a row? Even if it is something that is like, I'm going to sit and take 3 breaths before I start my day. So it doesn't have to take, a half an hour or an hour. Is there something that you could commit to do for 90 days? I would love to hear about that. Alrighty, it's time for me to sign off, and I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?